I found out our Airbnb host watched US sleep because I checked the router out of habit. Weekend trip, cute cabin, digital detox vibes. We rolled in loud, tossing bags, already snapping at each other about who got what room. Somebody slammed a suitcase into the coffee table and chipped the fake rustic wood, then blamed me for being uptight. The place looked staged. Throw blankets folded like nobody ever touched them, a bowl of pine cones on the table, and that same over-edited lake photo on the walls like every rental ever. I didn't feel scared. I felt tired and annoyed and ready to crash, which is why it hits me so hard now. How normal it felt right before it didn't. I went straight to the fridge for the Wi-Fi password because that's what I do everywhere. There was a magnet with the login info. Easy. I still opened the network list anyway. 3 signals popped up: cabin guest, owner private, and one hidden necessity that blinked in and out. My phone only caught the hidden one when I stood by the bedroom hallway, like it lived inside the wall. I walked a few steps, watching the bars like a dumb little game. In the kitchen, it was weak. In the living room, it faded. Near the first bedroom, it jumped full strength. I stopped, turned, stepped back, stepped forward again. Same result. The strongest spot was right where the bed sat, like the wall was broadcasting at the mattress. Behind me, my friends were still arguing. I called dibs. You always take the good one. Stop being a bitch. Normal weekend friction. I didn't join in. I stared at that hidden network and felt a cold itch in my gut. Hidden SSID plus strongest signal in the bedroom isn't a printer, and it isn't an accident. I went in. The room had a cheap canvas print of a lake scene hanging crooked above the headboard. I climbed onto the edge of the mattress, lifted the frame, and found a clean hole drilled through the wall, dead center. A tiny camera lens stared back at me. Not a screw, not a sensor, a lens. The glass caught my phone light, and I saw a faint green flicker like it was awake. My mouth went dry. I dropped the canvas like it burned me and started scanning the room fast, hunting for anything that didn't belong. Above the TV was a dot tucked into the bezel. Same little circle, same faint green. I dragged a chair under the smoke detector, twisted it down, and it came off way too easy. Inside, where a battery should have been, was another camera. Then I saw the one that made my hands shake, a pinhole in the alarm clock on the nightstand, angled straight at the bed. Same brand look, same tiny green flicker. For cameras in one bedroom, all aimed at where people undress and sleep. I yanked the power strip out from behind the nightstand so hard it scraped paint. 2 of the green lights died. The other stayed on. Battery. Of course. I ripped cords anyway, tore the clock open, and crushed the lens with my thumb until it cracked and cut me. I didn't feel the pain at first. I just wanted the eye gone. I started taking photos like my life depended on it. Hole in the wall, close-up of the lens, the smoke detector guts, the clock split open, because I already knew what was coming. People doubting, people minimizing, people asking if I was sure. I stormed into the hall and said we were leaving right the fuck now. No debate. One friend laughed like I was doing a prank. Another got pissed because they'd already unpacked and lined up toiletries like they lived there. The one who booked the place got defensive and embarrassed, voice rising, saying I was overreacting, saying it was probably for security. I grabbed them by the sleeve, dragged them into the bedroom, lifted the canvas again, and held my flashlight to the hole until the lens reflected back at them. Security doesn't point at a mattress, I said, and I shoved the smoke detector in their hands, so they had to feel how real it was. That shut everyone up for about 3 seconds, then it turned into blame. You picked this listing. You always cheap out. How the hell did you miss this? Like the reviews would say, hey, by the way, the host likes collecting footage of strangers asleep. One friend started breathing fast, eyes wet, trying not to cry. Another went full rage, pacing, swearing, saying they wanted to find the host and beat his ass. The booker snapped back that they weren't psychic and everyone needed to stop dogpiling them. And then the 2 of them started yelling over each other, so loud it made my head ring. I didn't have space for the argument. I just kept moving. I did a fast sweep of the rest of the cabin because I couldn't stand the idea of anything else running while we panicked. I checked the other bedroom smoke detector, the vents, the TV stand. Nothing obvious, but that didn't make me feel better. It just meant I couldn't see what I couldn't see. One friend kept yelling that we should call the host and corner him, and I kept yelling back that I wasn't giving him a heads up while we were still inside his place. We shoved our stuff into bags like we were stealing our own clothes. Zippers snagged, chargers fell behind the bed. Somebody dropped their keys and started sobbing and cursing at the floor. My thumb finally started throbbing, blood slick on my phone case, and I wiped it on my jeans because I needed my hands free. We got out, locked the door like that mattered, and stood on the porch for half a second in the cold air, staring at trees like the woods had done it. The quiet outside made it worse. It was too normal. Birds, wind, nothing screaming danger. Just a pretty cabin waiting for the next guest to walk in and get recorded. We drove out, and the arguing came back in bursts. Whether to go straight to a police station, whether to call Airbnb first, whether we should turn around and grab the router as proof. Someone screamed that we were going to end up on a trespassing charge if we touched anything else. Someone else screamed that nobody would believe us without hard evidence. The whole car felt too small, like the air couldn't keep up with our breathing. At a red light, I opened my phone, trying to ground myself in something, and noticed it still showed connected Wi-Fi, cabin guest 5G. I hadn't seen that on the fridge magnet. My phone had saved it automatically, like the cabin reached out and grabbed me. That detail made my stomach twist because it meant the network was built to catch guests without them thinking about it. I opened a browser and went straight for the router's admin page. I work in IT. I know the usual defaults, and I wasn't about to just hope somebody else handled it. The password was still the factory one. The interface loaded and my stomach dropped again. There was a tab literally labeled Clips. Password protected. I couldn't open it, but I didn't need to. The word alone told me what kind of person labels their stash like that. The login logs were right there, though. Last login, 2 hours before we arrived. He checked his setup like he was preheating an oven. The logs went back years. Night entries. Remote access from outside networks, over and over. Not every night, but enough to scream routine. I scrolled while my friend drove, and the timestamps just kept coming. 1:12 a.m., 3:40 a.m., 2:05 a.m. Random weekdays, random weekends, always at night. I took screenshots until my camera roll looked like a report. I sent them to the group chat. One friend told me to stop because they didn't want to see it. Another demanded more because they wanted something solid. Even then, we were fighting about how much proof was enough, like we could bargain our way out of what happened. We reported it through Airbnb as soon as we had signal. They did the polite corporate horror. We take safety seriously and asked for evidence. We dumped everything. Photos of holes, the busted clock, the camera in the smoke detector, screenshots of logs, the hidden SSID, the Clips tab. They told us not to contact the host and offered a refund like money was the point. We called the local cops too. The officer sounded tired and asked if we had footage of ourselves. I told him no, just the cameras, the placement, the logs, and the fact there'd been access right before we arrived. He said they'd look into it. That phrase felt like a door closing, like he'd already filed it under weird rental drama. Airbnb pulled the listing after we reported it. Cops looked into it. Nothing ever came back to us that felt like justice. No arrest, no update that mattered, just silence and the kind of bureaucracy that lets creeps keep doing what they do. For days, I kept expecting the host to message. Fake apology, threat, anything. But there was nothing. Like this was so normal for him, he didn't even need to react. Now I check networks in every rental. I look for hidden SIDs. I scan smoke detectors and clocks, and anything pointed at a bed. I carry tape in my bag and cover whatever I don't trust. People can call it paranoid. I don't care. I still tape over hotel smoke detectors now, and I don't care if it looks insane. Better crazy than content. The night nurse in my psych ward watched us sleep like she was picking a favorite. I landed there after a bad spiral, the kind where you stop answering calls and start making plans you won't admit out loud. Locked unit. Heavy doors that thunk shut. Lights out at 10. Doors left cracked so staff could observe breathing. Most nights, I pretended to be out while I scrolled the shitty hospital Wi-Fi under my blanket, phone dimmed to nothing, trying to feel like I still had a life outside those walls. She did rounds with a clipboard and soft shoes. No chatter, no radio, like she didn't need anyone. At first, I filed her under normal. Then I noticed she never looked at the vital charts hanging by our doors, those laminated sheets with boxes for blood pressure and pulse and Q15 checks. Her eyes stayed on the bed. She looked at faces. She stared like she was learning us in the dark. Some rooms got 3 seconds, a quick light, a scribble gone. Other rooms got a full minute. With me, she lingered. I could feel it before I saw it, that pressure in the doorway. Her eyes tracked from my chest to my throat to my wrists, slow and neat, like she was memorizing where a person breaks. I started sleeping with my hands jammed under my thighs, so she couldn't stare at them. It didn't matter. She stared anyway, like she didn't need skin to know what was there. I tested it once. When I heard her shoes stop, I held my breath. Not long enough to pass out, just long enough to see if she'd react like someone checking safety. She didn't rush in. She didn't call out. She just watched longer, then wrote more. When I finally breathed again, she still didn't leave right away. She waited until my chest settled into a rhythm, like she was counting, like she was tallying something. In the day room, people talked about her, like she was a harmless ghost. One girl said the night nurse was sweet because she called her honey. A guy said quiet staff were better than loud staff. I said she stared. The girl snapped that I was paranoid. Paranoid, in a psych ward, the easiest word in the world to throw at someone you don't want to listen to. She said it loud enough that a tech looked over, and my stomach dropped because now it sounded like a symptom, not a warning. I tried going official. After breakfast meds, while the day nurse popped pills into cups like candy, I said the night nurse stood in my doorway too long and didn't check charts, just watched. The day nurse didn't look up. She said nights were understaffed and had to do more observation. Observation. I pushed and said it felt wrong. She finally met my eyes with that tired, practiced face and told me my anxiety spikes at night, that I should use coping skills that staff are trained. I said I wasn't asking for special treatment. I was asking for her to do the job the way everyone else did. The day nurse cut me off and warned me not to staff split. That's how the night nurse worked. She didn't hit anyone. She didn't yell. She used the building. She used the rules. She used her diagnoses like duct tape over our mouths. One night, she caught the glow of my phone under the blanket. Phones were allowed, but not after lights out, depending on who had the keys and what mood they were in. She didn't take it. She didn't scold. She tapped my doorframe once, light and neat, and stood there while I shoved the phone under my pillow and froze. I kept my eyes closed. I felt the flashlight settle on my face, then drift to my hands, then my throat. I heard the pen scratch on the clipboard, slow on purpose, like she wanted me to hear her writing my behavior into existence. Next day, my phone time got restricted for non-compliance. Nobody told me she'd reported me. Nobody warned me. It was just in the chart, and the tech at the desk shrugged like a machine. I argued, kept my voice level, said nobody told me any rule changed. The tech said it's documented, and slid the binder closer like that ended it. I felt my face heat up. I backed off because backing off was the only move that didn't get you labeled escalating. After that, she started doing small punishments that didn't look like punishments. If I asked for water, she brought a cup half full. If someone else asked, she brought a full cup and smiled at them like she cared. If a patient asked for a PRN for anxiety, she'd say she'd be right back, then vanish for 40 minutes, then return during rounds with the clipboard and write while the patient shook. People started snapping at each other over it. One guy accused another guy of snitching because his smoke break got cut. A girl screamed at a tech because her journal disappeared for an hour and showed up on her bed with a page folded like someone had been reading. Staff called it unit drama. It wasn't drama. It was us chewing each other while she stood at the edges taking notes. Then the guy down the hall started sobbing one night. Not quiet sniffles, full body sobbing like his ribs were trying to break out. He'd acted tough in group earlier, joked about being fine, asked for extra pudding like a normal dude. Now he rocked on his mattress and cried like a kid. I waited for staff to go in. I heard her shoes stop at his doorway. No ruse, no comforting voice. She just stood there. The crying got louder, then ragged, like he could feel her watching. He kept saying he didn't want to be here anymore, over and over, like his mouth got stuck on it. Instead of going in, she stood in the doorway and watched him rock on the bed, noted something on her sheet, and walked away. No meds, no check-in. Just Ada. A different tech finally went in later, too late and half asleep, and the guy went quiet the second help arrived, like he'd learned the lesson already. Don't bleed in front of her. Don't give her anything. Morning group came, fluorescent lights and stale coffee, and she showed up like she belonged in daylight. She brought it up casually. Rough night, she said to the guy who'd sobbed, smiling like she'd been there for him. He nodded because staff holds the keys and you don't pick fights you can't win. I watched his hands shake in his lap. I watched her smile stay steady. I wanted to say she didn't do shit. She just watched. I didn't because I already knew what would happen. They'd write paranoid, accusatory, non-compliant, and the rest of my stay would turn into punishment dressed as care. Someone else did challenge her. A loud older woman who never filtered herself said the night nurse watched people pee, that she stood too close, that she stared like we were animals in cages. The day staff did the calm voice and told her to breathe and said she was misinterpreting. Within an hour, they moved her to the room closest to the nurse's station for observation. That room was a punishment dressed up as safety. The older woman cursed and cried, and the staff wrote, agitated, next to her name on the board like a warning label. That night, I heard her start to argue again, then cut off mid-sentence like somebody stepped into her doorway, and she remembered who had the power. By then, I stopped sleeping. I stayed awake until after second rounds, eyes burning, just to avoid the feeling of her studying my face while I drooled on a hospital pillow. I timed my breathing when I heard her. I kept my body still so she couldn't write restless. I hated myself for performing, but fear makes you do ugly math. One night, I couldn't hold it. I sat up and hissed. "What the fuck are you looking at?" Low, sharp, trying to keep it from turning into a scene. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. Her eyes got brighter, almost interested, like I'd finally given her something worth collecting. She wrote on the clipboard and said, flat, that if I didn't lie down, she'd document escalation. That word again, like a blade. I lay down. She stayed in the doorway a few seconds longer, then moved on, satisfied. I counted days to discharge like I was doing time. I did the worksheets. I lied in group about gratitude. I swallowed meds that made my mouth dry and my thoughts slow. I kept my head down and tried not to give her moments. The night before they let me go, I woke up at 2:13 a.m., with my heart hammering like it knew before I did. The hallway light cut through my cracked door. She stood there already. No flashlight, no drones noise. Just her, watching, still as a post. I sat up and she didn't move. She watched my chest rise and fall. I understood, with this ugly clarity, that she liked the second you noticed her. She liked the helpless part. She waited until my breathing settled, then wrote something slow, and walked away like she'd taken a sample. I got discharged the next day. I walked out with a plastic bag of my clothes and a packet of papers telling me how to stay alive, like a checklist fixes anything. I expected relief. Instead, I felt raw, like the ward had scraped me down and sent me outside without skin. That night in my own bed, I woke up over and over, convinced there was light under my door. I kept checking my wrists like they were evidence. I still see her in my head every time I wake up from a nightmare, just standing in the doorway, counting breaths, deciding who looks closest to the edge. My professor learned my schedule before he learned my name. First week of college, big intro lecture, he never looked at me twice. I sat mid-row with a cheap notebook and a dead phone. trying to blend in and get through the hour without doing anything embarrassing. Then I started seeing him outside class, in the dining hall when I grabbed coffee, on the bus when I changed routes, at the library computer I always used because the keyboard didn't stick. He'd nod like we bumped into each other by chance, like it was some funny coincidence we shared. At first I told myself it was nothing. Big campus, same buildings, same routines, whatever. Then it kept matching my routines after I changed them. I stopped getting coffee at the same station. Next morning, he was at the other one, already there, already looking up when I walked in. I got off the bus a stop early and cut through the courtyard behind the theater building. 2 days later, he was sitting on that low brick wall, legs crossed, like he'd always belonged there. I moved my study time from afternoons to late nights because the library felt safer when it was busy. He started appearing in the library late, not reading, not working, just moving past the same aisles I used like he was checking boxes. I'd catch him in the corner of my eye, and my throat would clamp shut. I'd stare at the screen and pretend I didn't notice because what the hell do you do with a feeling you can't prove? In class, it started turning into this gross little game. He'd say, "Some of you," and his eyes would land on me like a tack pinning paper. "Some of you live in the older dorms. Some of you have late labs." I didn't talk in his lecture. I never stayed after. I never told him anything personal. Still, he acted like he knew me. One day after lecture, I opened my notebook and found a sticky note tucked under the cover. My last name, spelled right, and a smiley face. No "see me after class." No reason, no context. Just proof he'd been close enough to touch my stuff without me seeing it. My skin went hot, and I shoved the note in my pocket like it was evidence, like if I kept it I could convince myself later I didn't make this up. I started changing everything. I ate in my room. I studied in random buildings. I swapped my usual seat on the bus. I stopped wearing my hair the same way. I stopped using the same door into the dining hall. I started writing down dates in my notes app because my brain kept trying to downplay it the second I wasn't actively scared. Bus stop 912. Dining hall 758. Library row 3640. It felt paranoid, but it was the only thing that kept me from gaslighting myself. I told my roommate, and she laughed at first, like I was serving her a creepy professor story for entertainment. Then I showed her the sticky note and the list, and her face changed. She told me to report it. I said report what exactly because every example sounded small when I said it out loud. He nods. He shows up. He looks at me too long. She got pissed and called me a coward. I got pissed back and told her she didn't have to sit in that lecture hall feeling a grown man measure her like he was pricing meat. We fought hard enough that the neighbor banged on the wall. After that, we just sat there, both of us quiet, both of us scared in different ways, me scared of him and her scared of what would happen if I stayed quiet. I tried the middle option and went to my RA. She listened with that careful face people use when they don't want responsibility. She told me to document, like I hadn't already. She told me to avoid being alone, like I could schedule my fear between classes. I asked if she could walk me to the office that handles this stuff because I felt insane walking in alone with a story that sounded like he's around. She said she could email someone and check in with me later. That was it. I walked out furious and then felt stupid for being furious because she was the only person with any authority in my building, and even she was acting like my problem was too slippery to touch. The morning it snapped, I went to an academic building early to cram for an exam. The library was packed, the student center was loud. My roommate had someone over, so I used an empty seminar room on the second floor that students could unlock with a card. I swiped in, shut the door, dropped my bag, and finally breathed. I didn't even get my laptop open. Then I heard the click. Not the latch, the bolt. I turned, and he stepped in like he'd been right outside, waiting for my head to go down. He closed the door behind him and slid the bolt the rest of the way, smooth, practiced, no hesitation, like he'd done 100 times. My mouth went dry, so fast it hurt. He didn't act surprised to see me. He acted like this was the plan, like I'd agreed to be here and just forgot. He started talking like he was doing me a favor. He mentioned my dorm, not just the building, my floor. He mentioned the broken exit sign by my hall, the one that flickered and buzzed and made the corner feel wrong at night. He said he worried about me walking alone after my late lab. I never told him about the lab. I never told him my schedule. I hadn't told him shit. I remember staring at his hands, thinking those hands hold chalk and keys and coffee, and now they're in a locked room with me. I grabbed my bag and moved toward the door like I was leaving a normal room in a normal world. He blocked the door with his hip. He didn't shove me. He didn't grab me. He just angled his body so the gap disappeared. He moved closer than any teacher should. I could smell his cologne, clean and fake, like trust me. He kept his voice low and steady, like he was the adult and I was a confused kid who needed guidance. That tone made my face burn. I tried to push past anyway. His hand went to my shoulder like he was steadying me, like I was the problem. Then it slid higher, slow, testing, like he was about to check my fucking pulse. He leaned in like he expected me to freeze. I didn't freeze. I shoved him with everything I had. He hit a desk, knocked over a chair, swore, and for a half second his face changed from calm professor to pissed off man, and it scared me more because it was honest. I yanked the bolt down, flung the door open, and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I hit the main hallway, where classes were changing and people were everywhere. I ran straight into the crowd and let it swallow me because being surrounded felt like armor. My bag slapped my hip, my coffee spilled down my wrist, and I still didn't slow down until I hit a bathroom and locked myself in a stall shaking so hard my teeth clicked. I wiped at my neck like I could scrub the moment off my skin. Then I went straight to Title IX because if I didn't go right then, I knew I'd talk myself out of it again. I knew I'd start telling myself it was misunderstanding and stress, and I'd end up back in that lecture hall acting normal. I told the story. I handed over my notes app list. The woman across the desk nodded and typed and used soft words that made my stomach turn. She asked me to be specific in a calm voice like I was describing a missed assignment. She asked if he threatened me, if he said anything explicit, if he touched anywhere else, if I told him no, if I had witnesses, if I could prove the room was locked. Every question felt like a hand pushing my head underwater, forcing me to relive it until my words got messy. I said the door was bolted. I said he knew where I lived. I said his hand moved up my neck. She kept circling back to what could be documented, what could be categorized, what fit policy language. They set up more meetings and made me repeat it again and again, like repetition makes it cleaner. They offer a no-contact directive like that stops someone who already knows your routes. They told me not to talk about it with classmates because it could compromise the process, and I wanted to laugh because my whole life already felt compromised. I asked if someone could at least walk me back from lab for a while. They said that was a different office and handed me another number. I called that number and got voicemail. I started having friends walk me anyway. I hated needing it. I hated more that it helped. Weeks went by. I kept seeing him while the process crawled. Outside the library doors. On the bus platform. Once, right after I filed the report, he stood at the end of the lecture aisle like he wanted me to squeeze past him again. I turned around and left, heart hammering, and later my academic advisor asked why I was skipping and warned me about my grade. I told her there was an issue with the professor and watched her face tighten like I'd dropped something dirty on her desk. She told me to focus on coursework and use campus resources like resources were coupons you clip and not people who keep dodging responsibility. When the school finally came back with an outcome, it was a bullshit paragraph. Title IX called it boundary violations, not assault. They said he'd be removed from teaching my section to avoid discomfort, like my discomfort was the thing they were managing, like the goal was to keep the machine quiet. Before anything could go on record, he retired early. That was the win they offered me. He chose to leave with a clean exit, and they treated it like closure. He disappeared from campus, and everyone acted like the problem was solved. My exam got rescheduled. I got a counseling link. I got told to avoid rumors and focus on healing. I still flinch when I hear a bolt slide. I still don't sit in empty rooms with the door at my back. I still check exit signs like they matter like a flickering light, can warn you when a man decides you're his. To the man who thought office hours included a locked room and my body, fuck you. Let's not meet.